Linda, starting tomorrow, our parents are moving in with us. I bought the house with the yard, so no complaining if you're not a fan. You might end up sleeping outside, got it? On moving day, Michael, my husband, dropped the bomb about living with his parents. He also decided on this house without consulting me and left me to handle all the house hunting. It's like he sees me as a maid or something, thinking I don't have a say. So I said, fine, then I'll sleep in the yard from now on. But don't be surprised by who joins me. Why are you being so stubborn? Just do as you're told, like always. Don't worry, you won't regret it. Sleep tight, but don't choke on your own spit. Okay, those last words are on you. You'll regret this, mark my words. And with that, I started getting ready, picturing Michael's worried face. The next day, he came to the yard and immediately frowned when he saw the tent I had set up. He stopped in his tracks, looking puzzled as he approached. Linda, why are you pitching a tent? You said you'd sleep in the yard, so I'm just using my camping tent. It's spacious out here, I replied calmly, stepping out of the tent with a smile. Michael frowned even more and muttered, you'll regret this. Sleep however you like, but don't say I didn't warn you. He didn't think I actually sleep outside. You're ridiculous, you know. Even if you like camping, setting up a tent in your own yard is just embarrassing. Michael mocked with a smirk, but I stood my ground, ready for my comeback against him. My husband still had that smirk on his face, but inside I was quietly amused. Just then, my in-laws arrived. They seemed taken aback by the sight of the tent, whether they understood what was going on or not. I felt a bit relieved, hoping their presence might calm my husband down a bit. When I greeted them, they looked puzzled and asked about the tent. Linda, why is there a tent in the yard? Are you planning a camping trip? They inquired, clearly curious. Before I could respond, my husband jumped in. Oh, Linda wanted to sleep outside. She's a big fan of camping, you know, he said, smoothly lying through his teeth. I couldn't believe how composed he was while deceiving them. But my in-laws accepted it without much fuss, knowing my love for camping. Just be careful not to catch a cold, they said with concern before heading into the house. Now, go make dinner, and don't say anything unnecessary to my parents, all right? My husband resumed his usual commanding tone after the in-laws left, but I shot back, sure thing. I'll cook for 5 then. Can a housewife even count? It's just the 4 of us. You, me, and my parents. Stop being dense and start cooking. You're getting on my nerves. Grumbling, my husband made his way to the new house. Suddenly, he froze in shock as a man emerged from the tent, unzipping it slowly. The yard fell silent. My husband's face registered a mix of confusion and astonishment. He tried to speak but couldn't find the words. Sorry to intrude, the man said. Why is Jim here? What's happening? This man was my husband's boss, Jim, someone my husband couldn't underestimate. It was understandable that he was taken aback to see Jim coming out of the tent where I had slept. Could it be that Linda and Jim are having an affair? Remember what Linda said yesterday, don't regret whoever I sleep with. Is she referring to an affair? What do you mean? That's not possible. Jim just got here about 30 minutes ago. I also enjoy camping. I was simply waiting in the tent until Masayoshi woke up, my husband explained, his face draining of color as if he could hear the gravity of the situation. Our private conversation had been overheard by Jim. I had heard from Linda before, but I didn't want to believe until now that you were hiding your true nature and mistreating your wife. Jim spoke slowly and calmly, but his words carried a hint of anger towards my husband. Panic swept over my husband's face, and his body began to tremble. No, that's not it. I was just being a bit firm. It's not mistreatment or anything. Just firm, he stuttered, but it didn't seem convincing to me. There was a clear tone of malice and superiority in his words. What had Linda done to deserve this? Jim's voice grew increasingly heated, causing my husband to shake even more. The arrogance he had displayed earlier, mocking me, had vanished. He seemed like a mouse cornered by a cat, frozen in fear. I can't believe this, Michael. You do great work at the company, but to treat your wife like this, I'm frankly disappointed. I never meant to mistreat my wife. I've just been stressed lately with work not going well, and I guess I took it out on her, my husband said, sweat dripping down his face as he searched for excuses, his mind racing. Despite what Jim said earlier, my husband was highly respected at work, not just for his job performance but also for his character. If you didn't know better, you wouldn't believe he could treat his wife poorly. But both Jim and I knew the truth. all the things my husband was hiding, and Jim's visit today was connected to those secrets. Then Jim quietly mentioned a woman's name to my husband, Lily Smith. You're familiar with her, right? Yes, she works at a client I handle. Is there an issue with her? She's my wife. Immediately, my husband's eyes widened with shock and confusion, rendered speechless. His expression shifted instantly to one of surprise and fear. Jim stared at my husband with a cold gaze. Gathering his courage, my husband began to speak hesitantly. Lily is Jim's wife. But that can't be, you have different last names. Lily uses her maiden name at work. It's easier for everyone as she's referred to by the name they know. Many women at her workplace do the same. I didn't know anything, and I've made a terrible mistake. In truth, my husband was having an affair with Lily Shimamoto, unaware that she was his boss's wife. Jim had come today to address the affair. I was truly stunned when I learned about your affair, especially that the other woman was my wife. This isn't something that can be shrugged off as a misunderstanding, and regardless of who the other person is, having an affair is unacceptable, Jim stated firmly. You heard it from Linda. Hey Linda, how long have you known? Since when? I've known for several months, since around the time Michael started to withdraw after learning about my infertility, I responded. The catalyst for my husband's mistreatment was my infertility discovery. While undergoing treatments, my husband was unsupportive and distanced himself, leaving me feeling alone. One day, when he claimed he was on a business trip, I accidentally witnessed him leaving for a romantic getaway. That's when I decided to investigate his affair, leading me to discover that his mistress was his boss's wife. Empowered by this revelation, a thirst for vengeance ignited within me. Then my husband floated the idea of purchasing a house in the countryside. His proposal became the catalyst for propelling forward my revenge scheme. I closely monitored his actions and meticulously crafted my plan for retribution, which led to the current circumstances. Michael, you claimed you wanted children, so I decided to redouble my efforts with the infertility treatments. But instead of standing by me, he began to ignore me completely. You left me for Lily, didn't you? You just admitted you never meant to mistreat me, but you were doing it on purpose, weren't you? You were pushing me to my breaking point, aiming for a divorce. Keeping me in the dark about living with your parents was all part of the torment, wasn't it? What do you have to say? Every word dripped with fury as my husband stumbled over his response. I could see that I had hit a nerve. With a piercing stare, I locked eyes with my husband, while Jim's gaze conveyed a mixture of disappointment and disdain. My husband's face turned pale, and his body shook, but he pushed himself to speak, adamantly denying the truth. I admit I may have been tough on Linda, but I strongly reject the accusations of an affair. It's just a baseless claim from Linda and Jim. There's no evidence, right? Linda mentioned a romantic trip, but I simply ran into Lily by chance during a business trip. We had meetings and went for drinks because of work, but there was no affair. I understand, indeed, there's no evidence. We haven't prepared any, right? There's no proof, but you're definitely having an affair. Admit it and apologize to Jim first. Linda, enough now. I didn't have an affair. If you want me to confess, show me the evidence. Don't act all high and mighty and order me around. My husband erupted in anger, his words aimed at me without restraint. The tension in the air crackled with my husband's fiery rage, a clear sign that he felt cornered with nowhere to hide his true self. Unknowingly, he was digging his own grave. What's the matter, Michael? Why are you shouting like that? It's echoing inside the house, I remarked, bewildered by his outburst. Oh, isn't that gentleman over there JLI? I'm terribly sorry for causing a disturbance. Actually, I came today to discuss Michael's affair, Jim announced calmly. The in-laws were undoubtedly stunned by Jim's words. They stood frozen, mouths open in disbelief, as a heavy silence settled over the scene. After a tense 10 seconds, Michael's father-in-law cautiously spoke up. Is it true about the affair, Michael? I find it hard to believe Jim would joke about something like this. Can you explain so we can understand? Dad, it's not true. I'm innocent. Jim is just assuming I'm guilty without any evidence. I swear I haven't done anything like that. You can trust me. Linda, what's happening? I don't understand anything, Mother, Michael protested. I'm sorry to have startled you, but what Jim is saying is true. Michael has been having an affair, and the other woman is Jim's wife. Now, I will prove it, I stated firmly. With that, I pointed to a specific spot. Michael and the in-laws followed my gaze, but all they saw was the tent in the yard. Confusion etched their faces, but they were about to witness something shocking. "I'm so sorry," Lily apologized as she emerged from the tent. Jim hadn't arrived alone. Lily had accompanied him. Thus, the entire conversation had been overheard by Lily as well. Meeting Lily for the first time, the in-laws were startled to see an unfamiliar woman stepping out of the tent. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was profoundly shaken by the realization that his affair partner had been nearby all along. "We don't need evidence, Michael. Lily has already fully admitted to the affair." "Actually, we do have evidence, but having Lily confirm it seemed quicker. I also wanted to see your reaction, and you certainly revealed your true colors. Unknowingly, you were digging your own grave. Bringing Lily here, has she already told you everything?" Michael's question prompted Lily to nod silently. Once again, Michael's body trembled, and his face drained of color. "Father, mother, as I mentioned earlier, I have been mistreated by Michael. I wasn't even informed about this living arrangement. I had to sleep in a tent in the yard because Michael ordered it. He treated me as disposable because of my infertility and chose to have an affair with Lily. I don't understand, Michael. You told us changing our environment might improve the chance of fertility treatments. Was that all a lie? You said you would support me, right, Michael? Instead of supporting me, you were planning to abandon me." I confronted, the disappointment and anger of my in-laws finally bringing Michael to his knees, where he prostrated himself on the ground, rubbing his forehead fiercely against the earth. "I'm truly sorry. I was shocked to discover Linda's infertility. Having children was my dream, so I thought if I couldn't have children with Lily, I'd need to remarry someone else. That's when I met Lily, thinking she could fulfill my dream." Michael trembled as he desperately confessed, seeming to realize that excuses wouldn't suffice anymore. Without lifting his forehead from the ground, he continued to apologize profusely. But then his body was abruptly thrown to the ground with a dull thud under the furious gaze of his enraged father-in-law. "Linda wanted children too, didn't she? Have you ever considered her feelings? Being unable to conceive, do you think of your wife as property to be discarded when no longer needed? What do you say, Michael? Answer me." My father-in-law's usual gentleness replaced by a rage I had never seen before. Yet his face betrayed a profound sadness. It was unthinkable that his beloved son could commit such inhumane acts behind the scenes and still attempt to justify them. "I've never been a parent, but the thought of my own child doing such things would tear me apart," my father-in-law expressed with anguish as Michael lay on the ground. His mother approached with a similarly pained expression. "Michael, I'm going to divorce you and claim alimony for the mental anguish you've caused," she declared, presenting the already filled-out divorce papers. Michael, still prostrate, took them. However, in a shocking turn, he retorted, "Dad's right. A wife is just property to me, disposable when no longer needed. Clearly, it's all Linda's fault. Had I known about her infertility, I wouldn't have married her. Discovering it after marriage feels like a fraud. What alimony? You, the infertile one, should be paying. Don't you dare." My father-in-law grabbed Michael by the collar again, ready to confront him physically, but I stepped in. "Linda, why stop? Are you planning to forgive Michael?" he questioned. "No, father. I will never forgive Michael. But I won't let you harm yourself over him. He's not even worth hitting now. Please let me handle this," I calmly responded, leading my father-in-law to slowly release Michael's collar. After taking a deep breath, I pulled out a piece of paper and addressed Michael. "So everything is my fault because I'm infertile, and you're the victim, right?" Michael was left speechless as I handed him the paper, which contained results he had never anticipated. "Me, infertile? I can't produce children." It turned out the cause of infertility wasn't solely mine, but also Michael's. I had requested him to provide a sample for testing, knowing that infertility isn't always due to the woman. The results diagnosed Michael with azoospermia. While there might be a chance for recovery with treatment, it seemed challenging. I had intended to inform Michael, but he was too preoccupied with his affair to engage in a proper conversation with me. Ironically, now was the first time we truly confronted each other after so long. "I don't believe this. Is this some kind of setup by Linda? Trying to frame me? It won't work," Michael protested. "It doesn't matter if you don't believe it. You'll eventually come to understand. My only desire is to sever ties with Michael and ensure he faces the consequences he deserves." Now, sign the divorce papers quickly, I urged. Are you serious? With that tone, it's gotta be a lie. Tell me it's a lie. Michael repeatedly reviewed the test results, his head in his hands. Jim, the in-laws, and I could only sigh deeply at his state. Lily appeared to be filled with regret as well. Leaving Michael behind, we stepped away from the new house, and Jim and his wife returned home to discuss further. The in-laws then apologized to me, expressing their regret. We might not have been aware, but we failed to see the pain Linda was going through. We don't expect forgiveness, but this is how we feel. We will do whatever we can for you. Even if you divorce Michael, we will always be on your side and ensure he takes responsibility. Just wait and see. There was no need for you to apologize. I was at fault too for not speaking up sooner and allowing myself to be pushed around. Plus, I almost caused you both a lot of trouble because of me. Actually here, I decided to reveal a fact I had kept hidden from my in-laws. I confessed, surprising them. But they chuckled at my thorough preparation, murmuring, "It's all Michael's doing." After finalizing the divorce with my husband, I returned to my parents' home. It didn't take long before I received frantic calls from my ex-husband. "Linda, what's happening? This is all you're doing, isn't it? Answer me." His voice left no room for negotiation. Even over the phone, I could sense his sheer desperation. Suppressing a laugh, I decided to reveal the truth. "Why so panicked? I don't know much except maybe that the new house you bought is defective." "Hey, stop joking around. I just realized it's uninhabitable because I've been too frantic to notice. What are you going to do about this?" "I'm not doing anything. You pushed the house hunting onto me, so I just followed your orders. You were the one who made the final decision to buy her, right? Is there a problem?" The decision to purchase the house with a yard was solely made by my husband, yet he dumped the entire search on me. At that point, I had already considered revenge, leading to my strategy of making him live in a defective house. You can check online for signs of a defective house, like uneven floors, ceiling checks, and door and window operations. I created a checklist and went to the viewings, choosing the property with the most issues. My ex-husband's reaction confirmed that my plan had indeed worked. The only miscalculation was his secret plan to live with my in-laws, which could have caused them great trouble. Thankfully, they now live peacefully elsewhere, away from him. "Linda, help me out. I can't afford to move with the alimony payments and I've lost my job. There's also the fertility treatment. I truly regret everything. I shouldn't have cheated. I should have valued you more." "So you only realized you were wrong after finding out you're infertile? Well, that's good for you. You should reflect on your regrets and start over. Good luck living alone." Wait. Weren't we married? Don't abandon me, please. Listen to me." His self-centered remarks nearly drove me to explode with anger. Done with him, I found any further interaction merely troublesome. Yet, I had to make my point clear. A wife is not property to be discarded when no longer needed, Michael. You said that, remember? Let me reiterate, you are no longer needed in my life. You're expendable. Live with your regrets forever. Goodbye. I could still hear his voice through the phone, but I hung up without a second thought and blocked the number. He probably learned the hard way that some actions are irreversible. As for me, I started a blog and created videos about camping, enjoying a side income while engaging in my hobby. Jim, now divorced, had more free time and occasionally joined me for camping trips or helped with my video projects. I'm truly grateful that Jim and my in-laws stood by me. When I expressed my gratitude, Jim said, "Ignoring such a wonderful woman like you, Michael, really baffled me. If you ever need help, feel free to reach out." Perhaps due to my vulnerable state, my heart skipped a beat. But it wasn't until years later that I realized this flutter was real. Yes, Jim and I ended up getting married. But that's a story for another time. At my mom's funeral, my mother-in-law showed up with a smirk. She said, "This house will go to my son. Maybe I should pick a room now." I told her, "Actually, I'm the one getting this house." She argued, "But doesn't a wife's stuff belong to her husband? So technically, this house is my son's, right?" I sighed. She chirped, "Let's be friends now." I wasn't sure. "What do you mean?" She said, "I'll take over this room." I asked, "Are we living together then?" She said confidently, "Yes, that's the plan. This house is too good to be empty." I was still mourning, but my mother-in-law acted like nothing was wrong. "Why bring this up now? Can't you see I'm sad? This house is full of memories. It was built by my dad and cherished by my mom. I don't want my mother-in-law here, and my husband is letting it happen. To protect my beloved home, I took action before we moved in. I'm 42, work in an office, and thought I'd miss my chance at marriage. Then I met Michael 4 years younger, through a friend, and we tied the knot. He's caring and values my input. Where shall we honeymoon? You mentioned Europe, right? I asked, but you said you liked the Maldives. Let's go there, he suggested. My mom needs to stay with us. Dad's not well, and she's struggling alone, he explained. I get it, but didn't we agree not to live with parents? You're right, I'll talk to her. My husband always indulges my wishes, which sometimes makes me feel guilty. Finding a good partner is a blessing, but there's a lingering sadness. My dad passed away 3 years before I got married, so I couldn't share my wedding with him. He was a strict boss at a small business, and I looked up to him. Despite the company's size, he earned well, and we had a decent home where we held his funeral. Working in an office made me appreciate my dad even more. Then 2 years after our wedding, my mom also passed away. Your mom too? My husband asked, concerned. Do you need a moment in the other room? Funerals usually aren't held at home, but we did it for my mom. Throughout my mother's funeral, my husband was there for me, a constant support. I felt incredibly lucky to have him. Then my mother-in-law, Nancy, arrived. I'm so sorry for your loss, she said. Thank you, I replied. I hadn't spent much time with Nancy before, keeping a respectful distance, but during the funeral, I saw a different side of her. Afterward, Nancy approached me, which wasn't unusual, but her demeanor was strangely cheerful. Thanks for your help during the funeral. It went smoothly because of you, she said. Now that it's over, let's drop the formalities. I was surprised. At first, I thought she was being considerate, given my grief, but it soon became clear that wasn't her intention. Your parents had such a lovely home, I said. Hold on a sec. She boldly ventured further into the house. Mom, this isn't a good time. Some areas are a bit messy, I protested. Unfazed, she announced, don't worry about the details. What matters is, this house will go to my son. Maybe I should pick a room. I hesitated. Mom, actually, I'm the one inheriting this house. She smirked. Your parents didn't have any other kids, right? And doesn't a wife's stuff belong to her husband? So technically this house is my son's, isn't it? I sighed. Is that really how it works? She chirped. Let's just get along from now on. I paused. What do you mean by get along? She confidently replied, I mean, I'll take this room. You and Michael will move in later, won't you? I asked, so we'll be living together. She declared, exactly. It's settled. Such a grand house shouldn't have empty rooms when 2 people can live here. Finally, I won't have to take care of my husband alone. But my mother just passed away, and my mother-in-law is talking about this. Can't she see how sad I am? I'm starting to get angry, even though the funeral just ended. Why would she joke at a time like this? My husband overheard our conversation and intervened. Mom, what are you saying? This isn't the time for this. My mother-in-law brushed it off. Why are you making such a fuss? But my husband was firm. Please leave. He escorted her out. Sorry, she can be difficult. He'd apologized. It's okay. Thank you for handling it, I said. In that moment, I appreciated my reliable husband. Yet later, I realized his reason for scolding my mother-in-law was subtly different from mine. 10 days after my mother's funeral, as things calmed down, we talked about my family home. Then my husband made an unexpected suggestion. This apartment is cramped. Shouldn't we move to my parents' house? I proposed. You're right. With more stuff and maybe kids in the future, it's better than this tiny place, he agreed. So we should start getting ready, he said, then added. But there's something I want to discuss about the move. What is it? I asked. He hesitated, then said, considering the big house and empty rooms, I thought maybe my parents could move in with us. Wait, you mean live together? I was surprised. My husband is kind, but lately I've noticed something. While I thought he always valued my opinion, maybe he's just going along with things. Could he be too easily swayed? His suggestion about living with my mother-in-law, despite my objections, makes me wonder. He keeps bringing it up, putting my mother-in-law's wishes above mine. I've said it before. We're not living together. I remind him. But Mom won't let it go, he says. I argue. You stood up to her during the funeral. You defended me and said no to living together. Well, yeah, I was mad about her intrusion, but that doesn't mean I'm totally against it. I just didn't think it was the right time to decide, he explains. It's clear. He nods along and passes on my words, but he seems more inclined to agree with my mother-in-law. Plus, despite advocating for proper discussions, he keeps his distance and avoids making firm decisions. Maybe he thinks he's staying neutral, but people like him can be tricky. They convince themselves they're neutral and can make the right calls. It's frustrating. Anyway, I refused to live with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested taking over a room. I've said it before, and I won't budge. Tell your mom that, I tell him. Why? It really bothers you, he responds. Fine, I'll tell her myself. Well, I had mentally prepared for the possibility of living with my in-laws when we got married. Witnessing my mother-in-law's behavior at my mother's funeral made it clear. Living together in my cherished family home, built by my father and lived in by my mother, is out of the question. And now, with my husband's lack of assertiveness apparent, the idea of cohabitation is unthinkable. When my husband relayed my opposition, my mother-in-law directly challenged me, asking why I was against it when we have such a spacious house. She insisted that as Michael's wife, his parents are now mine too. I've already declined living together. I'm sorry, but with my husband's mobility issues, it's too much for me alone, I explain. So you're abandoning us? Did you even listen to your husband's reasons? My mother-in-law counters. I'm sorry, but after this heartless response, I won't ask anything of you anymore, she retorts. I feel for my father-in-law's health, but based on my mother-in-law's past behavior, I can see a future where all responsibility for him would fall on me if we lived together. If that's the path we choose, significant changes in my husband and mother-in-law's mindset are essential. A few days after my mother-in-law's accusation, my husband began rearranging the living room, shifting furniture, and creating space. What's going on? Are we storing boxes here? I inquire. He responds, no, I'm making room for 2 beds. The mention of 2 beds sends a shiver down my spine. Are your parents coming to stay? I cautiously ask. No, they're moving in, starting today. This is truly the worst, he admits. Despite my objections to living together, my husband and mother-in-law have decided on it. She said she wouldn't rely on me anymore, yet she's turning to you instead. Why? I ask. He explains, their lease is up, so we agreed they'd move here instead of renewing. It'll be crowded for 4 people, but we're moving soon, right? Just bear with it for a bit. But that's not what I meant. Why is cohabitation even an option? I've said before I don't want to live with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested taking over a room. I'll talk to Mom. From now on, we'll be living together, so please try to get along, he insists. Why do you always side with your mom? I question him. He explains it's not about favoring her. I consider both your opinions and make a decision. My husband, usually accommodating towards my mother-in-law, seems to have fallen into her cohabitation plan. Maybe he's unknowingly influenced by her, thinking he's making independent choices. I used to see my husband as kind and caring, but paired with my mother-in-law, he becomes quite a challenge, and now I'm reluctantly pushed into living with my in-laws, just as I feared. This apartment is too small for 4 adults. We'll manage until we move, I remark. It's frustrating. She just arrived, and now she's complaining about the room. I apologize for the sudden addition of 2 elderly people. We'll try not to inconvenience you. If your mobility issues cause any problems, please let us know. My father-in-law, Tommy, who has mobility issues, seems better than expected. He experiences minor discomfort when moving, but nothing serious. Was my mother-in-law genuinely struggling to care for him? He's polite and even offers to do things on his own. Unlike my mother-in-law, he doesn't seem troublesome. Or so I thought. Is there a pharmacy nearby? I forgot my medicated patch and need to buy one, my father-in-law asks. Wait, dear. With your mobility issues, it's best to stay here. If you fall outside, it'll inconvenience Michael and others, right? Ask them to buy the patch for you, I suggest. But I usually buy it myself. Didn't they say to let them know if you need help? Well, you have a point. Sorry, but I need it urgently. Can you go get it for me? He sighs. Of course. While fetching a medicated patch might seem trivial, why does my mother-in-law make decisions without involving me? And though my father-in-law seems polite, He appears to follow my mother-in-law's lead, just like my husband. He's become her yes man. It's a small errand this time, but as we continue living together, I fear everything will eventually fall on me. Can I let these people move into my parents' cherished home? It's not a laughing matter. If they move in, they'll tarnish the house. I must find a way to protect my parents' legacy. As my mother-in-law and father-in-law prepared to move into my parents' home, I decided to take preemptive action. My mother-in-law was in good spirits, eager about moving into a spacious house. "Hey, can we borrow the key to your parents' house? We want to check out our rooms." "I have some errands, so I'll give the key to Michael," she requests. "Michael, can you drop us off before heading home? We want to visit the storage room where we left our stuff. We need to measure furniture sizes," she adds. "Sure thing. I'll take the key," I reply. Despite my mother-in-law's cheerful demeanor, there were no conflicts between us, and about 10 days passed uneventfully. However, behind the scenes, my preparations were steadily progressing. "Okay, everything's set for the move. Life in that house will start soon," I announced once my husband and in-laws finished their preparations. "I have something to discuss," I said. "What is it?" "Spit it out," my husband urged. "Is it about our move celebration plans?" My mother-in-law wondered. "No, we're not moving there," I clarified. "What? What do you mean?" she exclaimed. I handed over a document. "This is my application to renounce my inheritance," I said. "Renounce your inheritance? That's a joke, right?" my husband protested. "It's no joke. Look, it's officially approved by the court," I insisted. "That house means a lot to me. I couldn't bear to see you living there, so I've decided to let it go, keeping it as a cherished memory in my heart," I explained. "What madness possessed you? You could have sold it for money even if you were giving it up. Why abandon it?" my mother-in-law scolded. "Even if I sold it, you'd just rely on the money. I thought it'd be clearer if I had nothing," I reasoned. "We moved out of our old place for this move, you know. What's going on? How will you make it up to us?" she retorted. "I've always opposed living together, yet you forced it on me without proper discussion. So I had to take a stand." I stood firm. Upon hearing that I renounced my inheritance, both my husband and mother-in-law were stunned, their faces drained. They were speechless, their energy depleted. My father-in-law looked puzzled as he watched them. "But I'm not backing down, Michael," I pressed on. "I've been considering divorce. What do you think?" "Divorce?" My husband stumbled over the word. "Michael, you should divorce this absurd wife immediately," my mother-in-law chimed in. I had expected her immediate call for divorce. What I wanted to know was whether my husband could make his own decision at this crucial moment. If he yielded to my mother-in-law now, our future together would be even more challenging. "Even being suddenly asked about divorce is troubling, Mom," my husband muttered. His response was pending, but my determination to go through with the divorce had solidified. "Fine, divorce is the only option," my mother-in-law snapped. "Michael, it's unavoidable." "Your mom is adamant," my father-in-law intervened. "Well, it seems you also want a divorce, and maybe that's for the best." Even in significant decisions, my husband and father-in-law remained yes men to my mother-in-law. And now my husband's words made it seem like he was changing his mind for my sake. "Very well," I declared. "Let's proceed with the divorce. I'll move out with just the essentials." I spent the night at a budget hotel. The next day, I had urgent matters to attend to, so I took a half day off work and went back to the courthouse. A few days later, my mother-in-law called me. "What's this about the house becoming yours?" she demanded. Why the sudden concern? "Did you learn about it during the estate division process?" I asked. "Yes, that house is rightfully mine. You forged documents and deceived us," she accused. "Why would I forge court documents? Those are genuine," I replied. "Then why is the house going to you when you were supposed to renounce the inheritance?" she pressed. After that, I withdrew the renunciation application. Renouncing an inheritance is complex. Once filed, it takes about a month to be accepted, during which it can be withdrawn. The documents I showed were from the application stage, not acceptance. I made you believe I had given up the house and mentioned divorce to see your reactions and plan my next steps. I hoped Michael would oppose divorce. But your mindset didn't change, I explained. So the house really becomes yours? Since it was acquired before the divorce, it's subject to property division, right? She inquired. In such cases, you two would split the proceeds from selling it. She tried to assert her claim. But I had prepared for this. If it were jointly acquired, it'd be shared property. But it's inherited, so it's exempt from division. Unfortunately, specific assets like this aren't eligible for division. I reiterated. Did you consult a lawyer when you found out the house would be mine? She asked. If Michael had paid off the house loan or covered renovation costs, those expenses might have been considered, but I assumed that didn't happen. I replied. What about the money Michael would get through property division? She pressed. We've only been married a short time, so there's not much. Maybe just the car, though it still has a loan on it. I explained. You're selfishly claiming the inheritance, aren't you, heartless? She accused. I'm protecting my parents' memories. I don't want people like you in our home. If you have further complaints, consult a lawyer, I responded firmly. After the call, divorce proceedings went smoothly. Presumably, she urged my husband to divorce me promptly. Regardless, the divorce was finalized, and I no longer had to deal with my in-laws. I felt relieved, as if I'd safeguarded my father's home. After I moved out, my former in-laws stayed in the apartment my ex-husband and I used to share. It wasn't spacious, so even with one less person, it must have felt cramped. They explored other housing options, but faced challenges due to their age. Eventually, my ex-husband rented a smaller single-family home for them to live in together. Though smaller, it's still a house, so the rent is likely higher than for the apartment. He'll need to support them going forward. My ex-husband is in for a tough time. My former mother-in-law was excited about the large house my father left behind, but now she's settling for a smaller home. I imagine she's disappointed. As for me, I've started a new life in my parents' house. It feels comforting, as if they're still with me. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time. My husband Camille apologized to me in such a Philippines manner, saying he got his mistress pregnant and we needed to break up. I was dumbfounded, and my affection for him ran out 6 months ago. Is the mistress someone I know? I asked. Yeah, it's Kyra. Remember meeting her again at Alice's wedding reception. Since then, my husband seemed completely unashamed. Alice's wedding was the year before last, so you've been cheating for over a year. Alice was a college classmate, and Kyra was a junior 2 years behind me. She was in the same research group as Alice, and we played tennis together in college, so I remember her well. She was nicknamed Little Devil behind her back and was quite famous in a way. Huh. Oh, is that so? Time flies when you get older. My husband just laughed it off. What on earth was he thinking? I can't understand him at all. I'm Viola, 30 years old. I met my husband in the college tennis club despite him being 5 years older at 35. He often showed up as an alumnus who loved happy hours, had lots of friends, and was friendly with everyone. He took great care of freshmen and was kind, but I later realized it was limited to girls after we started dating. I cried many times due to his cheating habits back then, but I loved him and married him right after graduation. But once I started working, I got to know the real him, or rather, his useless side. He frequently appeared in the tennis club's clubhouse, acting all high and mighty with the juniors because he was completely ignored by his peers. The truth was he was so incompetent at his job that he wasn't given any serious responsibilities. Even now, there's no prospect of a raise or promotion. He's just a pretentious good-for-nothing who can't do his job or household chores. I tried various things to change him after we got married, but his refusal to change made me give up. The reason I had to divorce him wasn't just that work was busy and it was a hassle, but also because his parents were good people, a reason that had nothing to do with my husband himself. So look, we need to split up quickly because of the baby coming. You can have this apartment, and I'll leave. That's the end of it, okay? I was taken aback by his careless words and my husband's sly grin. What? No way. Let's part ways cleanly. This is not a good opportunity. As I neared my 40s, I started wanting a child. I had graduated college and started working as a full-time employee. I found myself in a situation where I was earning more than my husband, and my company offered excellent parental and maternity leave benefits. I was ready to start a family, but despite our efforts, it just wasn't happening, and it broke my heart. The love I once felt for my husband had dwindled away, especially after discovering his affair and the news that he got the other woman pregnant. I was determined to cleanly and completely end the relationship. What infuriated me even more was his lack of remorse. Instead of apologizing, he simply voiced his needs and demands. It was evident that it was time to put an end to this unpleasant relationship that had dragged on for years. We would involve a lawyer, ask for compensation, and divide our property. And of course, we would expect something from Kyra as well. However, when I voiced my concerns about the financial aspect, my husband callously suggested that I take on the debt myself since it was his affair that caused the separation. When I glared at him, he relented, admitting that he might need his father's help to cover the expenses. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. Despite multiple calls from my in-laws pleading with me to reconsider, I remained steadfast in my decision. Even my father-in-law broke down in tears, acknowledging that if I left, it would spell the end for him. My mother-in-law begged me to reconsider, expressing her love for me like her own daughter. But even they understood once I laid bare the truth about my husband's constant infidelity and laziness. Finally, they apologized profusely, hanging their heads in shame. They even paid the compensation in a lump sum on behalf of my husband, who had no savings of his own. They made him promise never to ask for their help again and to repay them promptly. I still can't fathom how such a careless and irresponsible man could come from parents as decent and responsible as his. I decided to retreat to my parents' house. The divorce proceedings, which I had anticipated as a hassle, wrapped up faster than I expected. Returning to my recently relocated family home, 6 months flew by. I found myself consumed by work on weekdays and occupied with household chores on weekends, leaving little room to dwell on my ex-husband. Then, out of the blue, my best friend Alice called, seething with anger from the moment she started speaking. "Viola, did you know your ex-husband Camille and Kyra? They're living it up in a new high-rise apartment, flaunting their wealth everywhere. Kara even had the audacity to invite me to her baby shower party. The presents alone cost over $100, and there's a $100 participation fee. It's outrageous, isn't it?" she exclaimed. I was taken aback by the news. I hadn't realized that Kyra had given birth, let alone why she would reach out to Alice. Both my ex-husband and Kyra were well aware that Alice was my best friend. Why would Kyra even extend an invitation to her, knowing Alice would undoubtedly relay everything to me? When I tentatively mentioned this to Alice, her anger escalated even further. "She did it deliberately, Viola. Deliberately. That awful woman had the nerve to tell me she's so happy now, thanks to Viola breaking up with Camille. Can you believe her audacity? She's the worst kind of person. I want to put her in her place somehow." Alice raged. That nickname from our college days resurfaced in my mind. Kara was always known as the little devil, stirring up trouble among seemingly happy couples. Even when relationships were strained because of her involvement, she remained composed, wearing a facade of innocence. If a couple splits up just because someone else shows interest, it wasn't true love to begin with, right? They would have broken up eventually anyway, so what's the harm? She'd say, her words dripping with sugary sweetness, all the while smirking knowingly. I felt a pang of pity for Kyra, realizing she might never have experienced genuine love. Despite this, I knew better than to involve myself with her, so I made the conscious decision to keep my distance, at least for the time being. Kara didn't matter much to me. There was something else that demanded my attention: Alice. There's only one newly constructed high-rise apartment building, right? Have you heard anything about them moving in? I asked Alice, seeking any information she might have. "I've never met them," Alice quickly replied, "but apparently it was very recent. They've been boasting about securing a spa. Fortunately, someone who had bought one of the units had to relocate for work and put it back on the market without moving in." "Ah, that makes sense," I nodded, processing the information. "So, your moving day is Sunday, right? The baby shower party is on Saturday. You'll only need to be cautious for one day. There are multiple elevators, and they might use different entrances." "You're right, we haven't crossed paths so far, so it should be fine," Alice concurred. "We live together, but unexpected situations can still arise." As fate would have it, an unexpected situation did indeed unfold on Saturday. While waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I found myself face to face with my ex-husband and Kyra as they stepped out of the elevator. "Hey, Viola, what are you doing here?" My ex-husband spoke first, with Kyra chiming in. "Viola, are you here to celebrate with us? You must be eager to see our adorable baby, aren't you?" Kyra's voice was cheerful, her smile radiant, but her eyes betrayed a different story. They held no hint of amusement. What? Seriously, did you come to crash the party without an invitation? My ex-husband interjected, his tone incredulous. To scope out the high-rise apartment or catch a glimpse of our little prince. The casual reference to the baby as both baby and prince grated on my nerves. That's not it, I retorted coolly. I was just waiting for the elevator. I responded, consciously switching to a polite tone midway through the conversation. Camille was now my ex, essentially a stranger, and I didn't want to create a scene. "Ha, so you're planning to visit my house after all?" Camille remarked with a hint of amusement. "You're so silly, Viola. Stop being stubborn. Perhaps you're just envious of our luxurious high-rise apartment and our adorable little prince. Do you still harbor feelings for me? Are you feeling lonely and longing to see me again?" "Camille, that's not acceptable," I interjected firmly. "Regardless of any lingering emotions you think I may have, you're now married to Kyra. It's inappropriate for me to barge into your home uninvited. And as for jealousy, Kyra, you're mistaken. But I appreciate your concern." Camille continued, dismissing my words. "Sorry, Viola, but Kyra and our son are our top priorities now. You're not welcome here." As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't help but feel perplexed. It had been 6 months since I last saw my ex-husband, and yet his mindset remained as irrational as ever. Kara's attitude was equally baffling. It dawned on me that my cheating ex-husband and his new partner were a perfect match in their own peculiar way. Reflecting on it, I regretted wasting my precious 20s on Camille. I'm utterly ashamed of my past with Camille, wishing to bury those memories deep in darkness. If only I had ended things sooner without making excuses, I wouldn't have to endure this nonsense from my ex-husband and his partner. My words seemed to strike a nerve with Camille, who retorted, "What's that? You're really lacking charm. Learn from Kyra. Even her jealousy is endearing. She's just given birth, yet she still takes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you find her admirable?" Not at all embarrassed, I replied calmly. I was simply going to the grocery store. I was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, clean and presentable. "That's the problem. I grew tired of your simplicity." Camille snapped. "Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home." Annoyed by his dismissive tone, I retorted, "Actually, this is my home." Seeing their disbelief, I had to explain. "I've been living with my parents in this high-rise apartment for 6 months now. My father was approached by salespeople when talks of selling the land he owns arose. They suggested that living in a high-rise would be more convenient, especially as he's getting older. While it's not entirely our land, we received a substantial sum from selling it. During negotiations, we were able to move into one of the higher floors for much less than market value." Camille was taken aback. "You're landowners with that much money. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. Give me back the compensation money." "There's no need for a property settlement," I replied firmly. "The compensation was a result of your affair, and the property settlement was a matter between us as a married couple." As I spoke, I noticed Kyra mumbling to herself, her silence speaking volumes. I caught it. "I can't believe Viola is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won," Kyra exclaimed, shooting me a glare. "But Viola, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you?" "I haven't lost yet." "Look, Kyra, I was never competing with you," I replied calmly. "In fact, I'm thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to break up with Camille. Oh, and I'm moving out of my house tomorrow, so I don't think we'll see each other again." "What? Why? You just moved into a high-rise," they both exclaimed in surprise. I shrugged, explaining, "Maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I found living in a high-rise unsuitable for hanging laundry outside. There are no balconies on the higher floors for safety, and only some windows can be opened. It wasn't suitable for my mother and me, who prefer drying laundry and bedding in natural sunlight and wind without using a dryer. Plus, the intense sunlight made it too hot even with the air conditioning on. The building also shakes quite a bit during even a magnitude 3 earthquake. It's designed to sway to prevent collapse, and the higher floors shake more." It was terrifying. Most stressful of all was the daily elevator ride. It gets crowded during the morning commute, and it takes time since it stops on each floor. The advertised 3-minute walk from the station felt much longer in the elevator. We were too bothered by the drawbacks unique to high-rise living, so we decided to move to a regular house with a garden. After all, luckily, our apartment sold quickly at almost the same price we bought it for. As I finished explaining, both my ex-husband and Kyra grinned. Love so we'll never see each other again. So, a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine, Kyra remarked sarcastically. I couldn't comprehend how he arrived at that conclusion, but one thing became abundantly clear. What I grew to despise and ultimately gave up on was that facet of you, pretentiousness without substance, an unwillingness to change or exert any effort. I reached my breaking point with you, but it's all right now. You're beyond repair, so goodbye, I repeated, echoing my ex-husband's own words back to him. Stepping into the just-arrived elevator, I glanced at Kyra, who was glaring at both my astonished ex-husband and me. Right before the doors closed, I added one final remark. By the way, are you sure the child is truly yours? My ex-husband looked utterly perplexed, prompting me to clarify. I mean exactly what I said, right, Kyra? You understand what I'm implying, don't you? As the doors closed, I didn't know what transpired next in reality. However, during our struggle to conceive, I underwent tests at the gynecologist, which revealed no issues on my end. I began to suspect the problem might lie with my husband, but he adamantly refused to get tested. Hence, I delivered that incendiary parting shot. Later, I heard from a mutual friend who attended Kyra's baby shower. Despite boasting about their high-rise lifestyle, my ex-husband and Kyra were residing on the third floor. Additionally, despite their extravagant demands for gifts and participation fees, only cheap snacks from the grocery store were served. When a friend voiced a soft complaint, Kara reportedly exploded, demanding gratitude for the chance to see her baby up close and insisting on payment. This sparked a heated argument between my ex-husband and Kyra, leaving their gathering in disarray. Thanks in part to my earlier cryptic remark, it was revealed that my ex-husband and Kyra had moved into a high-rise but were struggling financially, attempting to swindle money from their friends through fabricated reasons. Their deceit caused outrage among their friends, who promptly left. Meanwhile, my family and I settled into a single-family home with a garden, where I recently welcomed an adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was embroiled in controversy due to significant defects and illegal construction methods, making it unsellable. Reflecting on our situation, we realized we were unexpectedly fortunate. Now, I find solace in my severed ties with my ex-husband and cherish the tranquility of my peaceful days. As I hang the laundry on a sunny afternoon, my kitten sometimes curls up on the clothes, its adorable sleeping face bringing me a sense of contentment. Today, like many others, was a good day.